Why did the entire street hold its breath as the guard shifted into action? No one spoke. No one moved. The shutters were closed, the air hung heavy, and even the children, those restless bundles of life, were kept away from the windows. Only the sound of a loose metal sign creaking in the wind dared to break the silence. And she was there, kneeling in the shadows, weapon across her chest, eyes fixed not on the guard but on the doorway behind him. She knew the timing mattered. She knew one wrong step meant the whole mission. Months of waiting, weeks of planning, nights of sleepless calculation would collapse into chaos. The guard wasn't her problem, not yet. He was routine muscle memory, a man moving through orders written by someone far above him. But the house was her problem. Inside it, something waited, someone who had already taken too many lives. She adjusted her breath, slow, measured, rehearsed. The street held still, as if it knew her heart was thundering. Her name was Sergeant Elena Mirov. To most of her unit, she was just Myra. Sharp, quiet, never wasting words. A sniper by trade, though tonight she wasn't on a rooftop with distance as her friend. Tonight, she was on the ground within reach, close enough to hear her own doubts louder than the city around her. She could taste the dust in the air, smell the faint trace of burned oil from a generator somewhere nearby, hear the rhythm of the guard's boots pressing into the concrete, an unintentional metronome marking the seconds she didn't have. She thought of her father, not the soldier he once was, not the man who taught her how to breathe between heartbeats before taking a shot, but the quiet man who came home from war and never raised his voice again. He had always told her, it's not about the shot, it's about the silence after. That silence was coming, one way or another. The earpiece crackled, a whisper, Myra status. She pressed her shoulder to the wall, speaking barely above breath, eyes on, waiting for signal. There was a pause, a hesitation on the other end. She knew the man holding the line, Captain Hayes, respected her enough not to push, but she could almost feel his unspoken question, are you steady? She was steady, that wasn't the problem. The problem was she hadn't told them everything. Her teammates thought this mission was another high-value target, another faceless name on the endless list. But for her it was something else, personal, too personal. Because the man inside had once stood on the same side of the battlefield as her father, once shook his hand, once betrayed him. And that betrayal had rippled down the years until it found her kneeling in this street, every nerve in her body stretched thin. She didn't tell them that, not yet. The guard turned, his weapon slung lazily, his eyes scanning, bored. He scratched at his chin, muttered something under his breath, and then leaned back against the doorframe. This was the moment. She didn't move, not yet. Instead, her eyes flicked upward. Across the rooftops, the city's stray dogs barked at shadows. A single window cracked open, then closed again. Life persisted even under the weight of fear. And yet, every person on this street, every soul behind glass and brick, seemed to sense the storm brewing in silence. Her finger brushed the trigger guard. The memory hit her like it always did when the pressure climbed this high. That night in the academy, she had been younger, cockier, with something to prove. They mocked her for being small, for being quiet, for being the girl who wouldn't last a month in a man's trade. And then she took the shot. A rusted scope, a battered rifle, and a target so far they didn't bother measuring it. But when her bullet split the silence, when the instructors looked at her in disbelief, she didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She only whispered to herself, I belong here. Now, years later, kneeling on cracked concrete, she had to prove it again. Not to them, to herself. The earpiece buzzed. Myra moved now. She exhaled, slow. And she rose. The guard didn't see her at first. His eyes were elsewhere, lazy. But then movement caught him, her shadow slipping out of the wall's embrace. His hand twitched toward his weapon. Too late. She was already on him. Not with a shot, not with noise. Her hand clamped the back of his neck, her knee drove into his leg, and before he could suck in air to shout, he was on the ground. A quick press, a quiet choke. His body went limp. The silence returned. She dragged him aside, tucked him into the corner. A man who would live if he chose to stay down. She didn't hate him. She didn't even know his name. He was just another moving piece. Her breath caught. For a moment she leaned against the wall, eyes closed, steadying herself. Her chest felt tight, not from exertion, but from the weight of where she was about to go. Because inside that door waited the man who had broken her father's trust. And no matter how many times she told herself this was just another mission, just another target, her heart refused to believe it. She placed her hand on the door. The handle was cold, rough metal. She pressed her ear against the frame. Voices inside, 2, maybe 3, one deep, gravelly, one younger, impatient. She almost smiled at the thought of impatience. She had carried it once too. The arrogance of youth. The idea that time bends for you. She wanted to step inside, drag that arrogance into the light, and show it what the world really did to people who thought they were untouchable. But not yet. She glanced down the street. A boy no more than 10 peeked from a shuttered window. His eyes met hers, wide, unblinking, terrified. She raised a finger to her lips. The boy froze. Then slowly, hesitantly, he nodded and disappeared back into the shadows. That was the hardest part. The civilians, the watchers, the silent witnesses to violence they never asked to see. She carried their stares with her, every mission, every street. Her hand tightened on the door. "Myra status," Hayes whispered again. She didn't answer, not yet. Instead, she thought of her father's words. It's not about the shot, it's about the silence after. She knew what kind of silence was waiting on the other side of this door. She also knew she might not survive it. And yet she pushed it open. The door gave way with a groan, the kind of sound that felt louder than gunfire when the world was holding its breath. She froze, muscles tensed, every sense sharpening. Inside, the air was different, stale, thick with smoke and sweat. A single light bulb swung from the ceiling, casting shadows that moved like they had lives of their own. She entered low, close to the wall, weapon steady. Her boots made no sound, training, years of it, but her heartbeat, she swore the room could hear it. Voices drifted from deeper inside. The younger one again, sharp, impatient. "He's late. He said he'd be here by now." A pause, the gravelly voice answered, steady, assured. "He'll come. He always does. And when he does, everything changes." Her jaw tightened, that voice. It was older, weathered, but she knew it. Even through walls, even after years of stories that painted him as a ghost. She had only heard it once in her childhood, through a recording her father played, a message meant to prove that trust once existed. But her father had destroyed the tape after, burned it in silence, and when she asked why, he simply said, "Because some men are louder as ashes than as voices." And now that same voice was only a few steps away. She inhaled, exhaled, steady. She wasn't here for revenge, at least that's what she told herself. She was here for the mission, capture or eliminate, prevent whatever plan was brewing in this cracked, dim-lit room. That was all. But she couldn't lie to her chest. The rhythm inside her was not the rhythm of duty. It was the rhythm of something older, heavier. A child's wound still bleeding beneath the armor of a soldier. A shadow moved across the hallway. One of them was packing. She dropped lower, pressing herself against the wall, breathing through her nose to quiet the air. The packing steps drew closer. She tightened her grip. And then a sudden slam, a door opening from the side. Another man emerged, younger, wiry, with a cigarette dangling from his lips. He muttered something in the local dialect, careless. His eyes were half closed with boredom. Until he saw her. For a fraction of a second they locked eyes, his widened in disbelief. His cigarette dropped. She moved. Her hand clamped his mouth before sound escaped. Her other arm swept his legs. They crashed silently into the shadows, his body pinned. He thrashed, clawing at her arms until the cold press of steel against his throat stilled him. "Quiet," she whispered. His chest heaved. His eyes burned with defiance, but beneath it, fear. She had seen that look countless times. Men who thought they held the street in their palms until the street betrayed them. She leaned close. How many inside? He hesitated. She pressed the blade harder. Not enough to cut, just enough to remind him of the silence waiting. "3," he hissed. "3, maybe 4. Her brow furrowed. Maybe 4. The uncertainty was dangerous. She knocked him unconscious with a swift strike, dragging his limp form beside the guard outside. Another piece removed. She exhaled. The boy in the window flashed in her mind again, his wide eyes, the weight of innocence forced to witness darkness. She wondered if he was still there, peeking through cracks, praying silently. Her father used to say war wasn't fought on battlefields. It was fought in kitchens, in bedrooms, in the quiet spaces where families decided whether they feared tomorrow. She never understood it as a girl, but here, in this forgotten street, she did. She moved deeper. The voices grew clearer. The gravelly one, calm as ever, spoke with authority. "Patience, he'll arrive. And when he does, the others will fall in line. One strike and their whole command unravels." The younger one snapped back. "You talk like he's a king, but what if he doesn't come? What then? We wait forever." The older man chuckled, a low, bitter sound. "He'll come. Men like him always come back. The world doesn't allow otherwise." Her pulse quickened. Who were they waiting for? Who was worth this silence, this patience, this belief? She shifted her position, creeping closer. The floor creaked. Every nerve in her body screamed. She froze, holding her breath. The voices stopped. Then footsteps, heavy, deliberate, moving toward her. Her mind raced. She could vanish back, retreat into the hallway, or she could stand her ground. But retreat wasn't her way, not anymore. The footsteps drew nearer. A shadow stretched across the wall, broad shoulders, thick arms, a man seasoned by battle. He turned the corner. Their eyes met. His narrowed instantly, hand moving for his weapon, but she was faster. The butt of her rifle struck his jaw, the crack echoing like thunder in the small space. He staggered, grunted, tried to raise his arm. She drove her elbow into his ribs, swept his legs, and the giant collapsed to the floorboards. But not silent. The crash carried. The voices inside erupted, chairs scraped, boots pounded, weapons cocked. Her cover was gone. The house was awake. She pressed her back to the wall, heart slamming. Her earpiece hissed with Hayes' voice. "Myra, what the hell's happening?" She whispered, breathless. "Inside compromised, hostiles active." "Pull out," Hayes ordered. "Wait for backup." Her eyes flicked to the unconscious man at her feet, then to the doorway ahead, shadows shifting inside. The voice she knew still echoed in her ears. She couldn't pull out, not yet. Because she hadn't seen his face. Not the man from her father's stories, not the betrayer, not the ghost. She whispered into the calm, negative continuing. "Myra." She cut the line. The silence after was both terrifying and liberating. She adjusted her rifle, steadying her hands. Her body trembled not from fear, but from the collision of two forces inside her, the soldier's duty to the mission and the daughter's need for truth. She pushed forward. The room opened wide. Cracked plaster walls, a wooden table littered with maps and cigarettes, the smell of sweat and old paper. 3 men stood, weapons drawn. Their eyes locked on her instantly. And behind them, seated calmly in a chair like it was a throne, was the man she had come for. Older now, hair gone to gray, face carved with scars, eyes sharp as broken glass. He didn't move, didn't raise a weapon, he only smiled. "Alina Mirov," he said, his voice low, steady, and far too knowing. Her heart stopped. He knew her name. Her arms trembled as she raised her rifle. The three men spread out, circling, weapons aimed, but her eyes stayed locked on his. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, "but of course, you are your father's daughter." Her chest burned. He spoke the word father like a knife. The silence pressed in again. Not empty, not peaceful. A silence so heavy it felt like the street outside, the city itself, the boy at the window, all of it was leaning in, waiting for what she would do next. Her finger hovered on the trigger. Her breath caught. Because the man in the chair, the one who betrayed her father, the one who carried ghosts in his voice, was smiling at her as if he had been expecting this moment all along. The room felt too small for the weight inside it. 3 rifles aimed at her chest. Boots scraped against the floorboards as the men spread out, circling like wolves. The single light bulb overhead swayed, its flicker casting their shadows long and jagged across the walls. And in the center, calm, unmoving, seated as if he were carved into the chair, was the man who knew her name. Her finger grazed the trigger. Every instinct screamed to fire, to end the silence with a single shot. But something in his eyes rooted her in place. Not fear, not confusion, recognition. "Elena," he repeated, smoother this time, almost soft. "It's been a long road to find me, longer than you realize." Her jaw tightened. She hadn't told anyone her full name tonight. Not Hayes, not the team. To them she was only Myra, so how could he? Her voice cracked the silence, sharper than she meant. "You don't know me." He smiled, a small, tired curve of his lips. "I knew your father, that means I know you." The rifles pressed closer. The men shifted, impatient, ready for a signal that hadn't come yet. Her arms steadied, rifle raised, eyes fixed. But her thoughts scattered. Fragments of childhood memories flashed. The smell of old oil on her father's uniform, the distant look in his eyes when she asked about his war, the way his voice grew heavy when names slipped from his mouth like stones carried too long. And one of those names, she remembered now, was his. Her chest tightened. The man leaned forward in his chair, elbows on his knees, scars catching the light. "He told me once you had his eyes, I see it now, that focus, that silence before you act. He said it scared him sometimes." Her throat clenched. She didn't want to hear this. Not here, not with 3 rifles aimed at her lungs. "Drop your weapon," one of the men barked, his voice trembling more than he wanted it to. She didn't move, not yet. Instead, her eyes locked on the man in the chair. "You betrayed him," she said. He exhaled slowly, as though the word betrayal were too small to hold the truth. "No, I made a choice. Your father made another. That's all war is. Choices. Some break men, some save them, but none are clean." Her arms trembled. Rage simmered, but beneath it something worse, doubt. Because she had lived long enough to know he wasn't wrong. The 3 rifles inched closer. The air grew heavier. She felt every muscle coil, ready. And then the man in the chair raised a single hand. The rifles froze. He looked at her the way a teacher might study a student. "You didn't come here for orders, did you?" he asked. "Not for capture, not for elimination. You came here for answers." Her silence betrayed her. He leaned back again, his smile fading. "Good, because you deserve them more than most." The room tilted in her mind. She should fire, she should end this. But instead she whispered, "Why my father, why him?" One of the men cursed in their dialect, frustrated. "Why do you speak to her? Let me finish this." The man in the chair silenced him with a glance. Then he looked back at her, his voice lowered, steady, dangerous. "Because he was loyal," he said. "Too loyal. He thought war could be clean. He thought men like me could be trusted. He thought peace could be built without blood soaking through its foundation." He paused, his gaze pierced her. "And loyalty like that always breaks. Either you betray it or it betrays you." Her grip on the rifle tightened until her knuckles ached. She wanted to scream at him, wanted to call him a liar. But deep inside, some small, unwelcome part of her remembered nights when her father sat in silence, staring at nothing, his jaw clenched against words he never let out. The room spun with tension. The three rifles wavered slightly, their holders restless. The younger one's hands shook. She could see it in his grip. He wanted to shoot her. He was waiting for the moment. And yet, none of them moved without his order. The man in the chair studied her with unsettling calm. "Tell me, Alina, do you believe you're here for justice or for revenge?" The question sank like a blade. She forced herself to breathe, but the air burned. Justice, revenge. She had told herself there was a difference. Justice was clean, sharp, necessary. Revenge was selfish, blind, corrosive. But standing here, rifle aimed at a ghost from her father's past, she wasn't sure anymore. Her lips parted, the word almost came, and then a crack. Not from her rifle. From outside. The window behind them shattered, shards spraying into the room. A burst of automatic fire ripped through the doorway, chewing plaster and wood. The three men dove for cover, shouting. She dropped low, instinct screaming. Her rifle swung up, sights searching. Hayes' voice roared in her earpiece. "Myra, back up inbound, get out of there now." The world erupted. Bullets shredded the table. Dust filled the air. Shouts mixed with gunfire. The man in the chair didn't flinch. He sat calm, as though chaos were an old friend pulling up a seat. Through the storm, his eyes never left hers. She pressed herself against the wall, lungs burning with dust, ears ringing from the blasts. Her calm crackled with frantic voices, boots pounding outside, the street alive with shouts and screams. And still his eyes on hers. She thought of the boy in the window, wondered if he was safe, wondered if the street would ever breathe again. Her choices narrowed: stay and drown in the storm, or pull back, retreat into the night, carrying questions heavier than any weapon. But she wasn't ready to leave, not yet. Because the man in the chair had not moved, and his voice, calm, steady, cutting through the gunfire, spoke words that froze her blood. "You think this ends with me, Alina?" He leaned forward, the chaos exploding around him, bullets tearing through the room. His smile was gone now. His eyes burned like embers. "It begins with you." Her chest seized. The sound of gunfire blurred into static. For a moment, the whole world shrank to his words. "It begins with you." Her finger brushed the trigger. Her breath stilled. The decision hung heavier than the bullets flying past. And then the dust swallowed her sight. The dust choked her lungs. Shouts tangled with gunfire, boots stomping, wood splintering. The room had become a storm, walls shaking, air thick with smoke and plaster. She pressed herself low, cheek against the floor, her rifle clutched to her chest. Her vision blurred with grit, but she could still see him. The man in the chair. Unmoving, untouched. His men scrambled around him, diving for cover, firing blindly into the night. But he sat calm, as if the chaos were a performance staged just for him. And in the middle of it, his eyes never left hers. Her heart hammered, not from the bullets slicing through the air, not from the chaos threatening to swallow her whole, but from his words. "It begins with you." She clenched her jaw. Rage, fear, doubt, they all collided inside her chest. She wanted to shut his voice out, but it kept echoing, louder than the thunder of the firefight. Hayes' voice crackled through her calm. "Myra, pull out, do you copy? Pull out now." She coughed against the dust, eyes stinging. Her finger pressed her earpiece, but she didn't answer. She couldn't, because she wasn't sure if she could walk away, not without knowing what he meant. Her rifle's sight found one of the gunmen, the younger one. His hands shook as he fired wildly, curses spilling from his lips. She steadied her breath, squeezed the trigger. A single shot, clean. His weapon clattered, his body dropped. The room paused for half a heartbeat. The others shouted, fury spilling into their fire. She rolled, pressing behind the broken table, wood shards raining down. Bullets snapped overhead, each one a reminder that she was seconds from ending like him. But the man in the chair still hadn't moved. She shouted through the dust, her voice raw. "What do you mean? What begins with me?" For the first time he leaned forward, his face cut through the haze, scarred, lined, eyes sharp enough to slice. His voice carried steady, unshaken by the storm. "Because you're the one they fear," he said. The words hit harder than the bullets. She blinked, chest heaving. "What?" Before she could finish, the wall behind him exploded. Wood, dust, and fire swallowed the room. The force threw her back, her rifle slipping from her hands, her ears ringing with a deafening roar. When she opened her eyes, the ceiling above her swayed, the light bulb gone, the world tilted. Her body screamed with pain, dust clogging her throat, but her hands clawed the floor, dragging herself forward. The table was gone, the men were gone. And the chair empty. He was gone. Her breath fractured. Panic surged, sharp and electric. She scrambled, searching through the haze, but all she found were broken walls and echoes of boots vanishing into the night. He had slipped away. Her comm buzzed again, Hayes shouting, "Myra, talk to me. Are you alive?" She pressed the earpiece, coughing hard. "Still here," she rasped. "Extraction point 2 blocks east. Move now. The whole sector's lighting up. If you're not gone in 2 minutes, you're buried." She dragged herself upright, legs trembling, lungs burning. Her rifle hung heavy in her grip. Her body screamed to collapse, but her mind screamed louder. "It begins with you." Why had he said it? Why her? She staggered into the street. The world outside was awake now, doors slamming, voices crying, the smell of fire spreading through the night. Civilians pressed against walls, clutching children, praying to be unseen. The boy from the window was gone. She prayed his family had pulled him into safety. Her boots pounded the cracked pavement. Each step was a war with her own body. And behind her, the house burned. Flames clawed through its roof, smoke curling into the sky. A beacon for anyone who cared to know. The silence of this street was gone. Hayes' voice guided her, sharp and clipped. 1 block north, left at the corner, keep moving. But her mind wasn't on the street. It wasn't on the extraction point. It wasn't even on the flames behind her. It was on his face, his eyes, his words. "You're the one they fear." She turned the corner, legs threatening to give. A shadow lunged at her, a figure with a blade, desperate, reckless. She reacted before thought. Rifle up, strike to the throat, knee to the chest. The man collapsed, gasping. She didn't stop to look at him. She kept moving. Her lungs burned. Her heart thundered. The extraction point loomed ahead. A battered truck hidden beneath a canopy of darkness, headlights off, engine humming low. 2 soldiers waved her in, rifles ready. She stumbled into the back, collapsing onto the metal floor. The truck roared to life, tires screeching against the pavement. Hands pulled her upright, voices asking if she was hit, if she could breathe. She nodded, though the dust still clawed her throat. Hayes climbed in after, his eyes storm-dark, jaw clenched. He grabbed her by the shoulders. "What the hell happened in there? You cut comms, you went dark, you almost didn't make it out." She met his stare, her voice hoarse. "He knew me." Hayes froze. "What?" Her chest rose and fell, each breath heavy. "He knew my name, he knew my father." The words hung between them like a blade. The truck jolted over a pothole, the men inside bracing themselves. But Hayes didn't look away from her. His voice dropped, low, careful. "Myra, what aren't you telling me?" Her throat tightened. She could lie, say it was nothing. Say the target knew her file, knew standard intelligence, that it meant nothing. But the truth clawed at her ribs. She whispered, barely audible. "My father served with him, a long time ago. He betrayed him." The men in the truck shifted, uneasy. They weren't supposed to hear this. Missions weren't supposed to carry ghosts. Hayes leaned closer, his voice sharp. "And you didn't tell us." Her eyes burned. "Would you have let me come if I had?" The silence inside the truck was heavier than the roar of its engine. Hayes exhaled, his grip loosening on her shoulders. His voice dropped into something softer, something almost tired. "You're playing a dangerous game, Myra. You blur the line between orders and ghosts, and people get killed." Her chest clenched. She looked away, out into the night rushing past, streets littered with debris, windows lit by fear. He was right, but he didn't feel the weight she carried. He hadn't seen her father's eyes the night he burned that tape. The night's silence fell heavier than any scream. She whispered almost to herself, "It's not just ghosts," he said, "it begins with me." The men exchanged glances. Hayes' brow furrowed, suspicion sharpening. "What does that mean?" he asked. Her eyes stayed on the night, the flames of the house fading into distance, the boy in the window etched into her memory, the words repeating like a drumbeat inside her skull. She didn't know what it meant, not yet. But she felt it, deep in her chest, beneath the dust, beneath the pain, beneath the soldier's mask she wore. Whatever war was coming, it was no longer just about missions. It was about her. And as the truck thundered into the darkness, carrying them away from the street that no longer held its breath, she felt the silence return. Not peace, not rest. A silence that asked questions she wasn't ready to answer. Why did the radio fall silent, just as her hand tightened on the trigger? The street stretched out before her like a wound no one dared to touch. Burned-out cars, shattered windows, a stray curtain drifting from a second-floor frame like a torn flag. The quiet wasn't peace. It was something heavier, the kind of silence that holds its breath before it breaks. She shifted her rifle slightly, cheek pressed to the worn stock, one eye through the scope. The glass caught the faint shimmer of heat rising from the asphalt. Nothing moved. No voices. Not a single shadow crossed the open ground. And yet her pulse refused to steady. Someone was there, she couldn't see them, but she could feel it. "Do you copy?" her voice whispered into the calm. Static answered. Not a crackle, not even a ghost of a reply. The net was dead, cut. Her jaw tightened. A calm blackout wasn't an accident. It meant the city was awake now. The other side had noticed her team. Or worse, they had noticed her. Memory pressed against her like an old bruise. A year ago, different street, different country, she'd heard the same silence. Just before a boy walked into the open carrying what looked like a school bag. She hesitated that day, prayed she was wrong. She was. She had lived. Others hadn't. The guilt never left her. Tonight felt like the same question replaying itself. Would she trust her instinct or her hesitation? Somewhere deep in the ruins, a window shutter clanged shut. Her breath stopped. Then, faintly, she caught it, the metallic scrape of boots dragging across broken glass, the sound of someone trying too hard to be careful. She moved her aim an inch to the left. There, a figure in the shadows of an alley, barely visible, half hidden, too large for a child, not carrying a weapon, at least not one she could see. The air pressed against her ribs, thick and unbearable. Her finger found the curve of the trigger. But then something else, a flicker of cloth, not military, not camouflage, civilian. Her heartbeat slammed. What if she was about to repeat her mistake in reverse? What if pulling the trigger this time meant killing someone's father, someone's brother, someone who had been forced into this street like cattle driven into fire? Her throat closed, rage pressing against sorrow. Why was the weight of choice always hers? Why did the world keep handing her these impossible seconds that could stretch into a lifetime of regret? Behind her, the team's last words echoed in her memory. "You're our eyes tonight." She didn't have eyes anymore. Not really. Just this single slice of glass, narrowing the world down to one blurred figure in an alley. Her breath trembled as she exhaled. The finger eased barely from the trigger. She had made her choice, not to shoot, not yet. And in that pause, something shifted. The figure in the alley raised a hand. Slowly, palms open, no gun, no sudden move. A signal not of threat but of warning. She froze, warning of what? Her scope tracked the hand as it gestured, pointing upward toward a building across the street. A cracked rooftop, sunlight bleeding across broken stone. She tilted the scope, focused. And there it was. A glint faint, sharp, not sun, not glass, a scope, another sniper. Her chest hollowed out in an instant. The one in the alley wasn't an enemy. He was a shield, a decoy, a risked life to draw her attention. The real shot was aimed at her. Her breath cut off. She rolled left, body colliding with rough concrete, just as the shot cracked the silence apart. Brick dust exploded where her head had been. Her heart rattled against her ribs. The silence was gone now. The city had awakened, and she was already a step behind. She pressed her back to the wall, dust in her hair, lungs scraping for air. She had been outplayed, or almost. Because she wasn't done. Not tonight. Not after everything she'd already lost. Her hands steadied as she reloaded, checked angles, recalculated. The war had reminded her again. Hesitation always carried a price. And now, the entire street was holding its breath again, waiting to see whose story would end in the next heartbeat. Why did her hands shake when she had sworn they never would again? The wall at her back was still warm from the bullet that should have ended her. Dust clung to her lips, bitter and dry. She pressed herself flat, forcing her lungs into silence, counting heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Every second felt borrowed, stolen from the sniper across the street who had just missed. Not by skill, by luck. She swallowed the taste of iron in her mouth. She couldn't stay still. If she froze, she was already dead. Her rifle felt heavier than it had an hour ago. The strap bit into her shoulder as if the weapon knew the weight it carried wasn't just steel and powder, but every memory she hadn't managed to bury. She thought of her oath, the promise whispered into her father's grave years before. I won't run. Not again. Not ever. But promises made in peace feel different when bullets cut the air. Her father, a soldier no one remembered except her. The man who taught her how to read the wind by the sway of laundry lines and how to hear danger in the rhythm of footsteps. He'd been killed on a street much like this one. Civilians scattered, soldiers shouting, a choice made too late. She had carried that silence with her ever since. Now she was standing in it again. The figure in the alley still hadn't moved. His hand remained high, palm open, body trembling in the shadow. He was no soldier. His warning had saved her life, but at what cost? She couldn't reach him, not without exposing herself. And she couldn't call for backup. The comms were dead. Alone again. She risked a glance, quick as a breath. The rooftop glared back at her. She saw nothing now, no glint, no outline. Whoever had taken the shot had melted into the stone. Her chest tightened. A sniper who could fire and vanish meant someone patient, someone trained, someone like her. And that thought carved deeper than fear, because this was no longer a mission. This was a duel, two ghosts on opposite sides of a street, two hearts waiting to see who would stutter first. She steadied her hands on the rifle, set the scope, and tried to quiet the trembling in her veins, but her body wouldn't obey. Her breath caught halfway, her finger hovered inches above steel. She was breaking the rule she had drilled into her recruits. Slow is steady, steady is fast. But she wasn't steady, she was remembering. The boy with the school bag, the flash, the fire, the ringing screams that had followed her into every dream since. She had frozen then. A heartbeat of mercy had turned into a lifetime of regret. And here she was, years later, frozen again. The whisper in her head was cruel. Maybe you were never made for this. Maybe the mask you wear is thinner than you think. Her eyes stung. She blinked hard, biting down the memory until it tasted like blood. No one could see her weakness, but she knew it was there, coiled tight like a fist under her ribs. Movement. The rooftop shadow shifted, faint as a ripple in water. Her muscles jolted, instinct finally cracking through the fear. She snapped the scope upward, aligning in one smooth breath. And there, barely visible, the curve of a shoulder, the glint of a lens retreating behind cover. Her finger found the trigger and stopped because she saw something else. A hesitation. The other sniper had moved too slow, too unsure. That wasn't confidence. That wasn't the rhythm of a killer at ease. That was someone wrestling the same hesitation she knew too well. A reflection of herself. Her throat tightened until she thought she would choke on silence. What if the one aiming at her wasn't just an enemy? What if it was someone like her, dragged into a fight they never asked for, someone who once held promises in their chest and now carried only ghosts? The decision wasn't simple anymore. She could kill them, save herself, end the duel before it began. That's what the mission demanded. That's what survival demanded. But what if she was ending the life of someone caught in the same trap? What if tonight's silence would become their child's grief, the way her father's silence had become hers? Her finger trembled, sweat burned her eye, the rifle's weight became unbearable. She lowered the scope. For a moment the city seemed to sigh. The glassless windows, the broken stones, even the figure in the alley, everything hung in stillness, waiting to see what came next. She chose, not yet, not like this. Instead, she slid backward into the shadows, pressing herself deeper into the ruin's bones. If the sniper wanted her life, they would have to hunt for it. And if they hunted, they would reveal themselves. It wasn't bravery, it was something else. Maybe mercy, maybe cowardice, maybe the last shard of humanity she had left. But as she moved, the thought anchored itself into her bones. The next shot fired would not just decide the mission. It would decide who she became. Her breath slowed, her hands steadied. Somewhere across the street, another soldier was asking themselves the same question. And the entire city seemed to hold its breath with them. Why did the glass tremble before the next shot rang out? She crouched deeper into the ruin, cheek pressed to stone, the rifle cradled as if it were part of her body. Dust drifted with every shallow breath. The silence was still broken from the last bullet, yet somehow it felt heavier now, like the street itself was waiting to see who blinked first. Her eyes tracked every broken window across from her. Each one was a mouth that could spit death. Each shadow a potential hand squeezing a trigger. Somewhere in that lattice of emptiness, another heartbeat was measuring hers. The man in the alley still hadn't fled. He had frozen with his hand raised, a human statue carved in fear. She envied his simplicity. His role was survival, hers was choice. A flicker, top corner, fourth building on the right. The same glint, softer this time, cautious. The sniper wasn't reckless. They were reading her, probing, testing her patience. Her father's voice drifted back through memory. A duel isn't about pulling first. It's about pulling last when you're certain. She steadied her breath, let the scope rest, heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of her trigger finger. And yet, she hesitated again. Not out of fear, but out of something stranger, a pull she couldn't explain. Because she had seen it, the same falter in their aim, the same delay. Whoever was across from her wasn't a machine. They were shaking too. The realization made her chest ache. This wasn't predator against prey. It was mirror against mirror. Her finger tightened anyway. Then movement. The alley man dropped to his knees suddenly, clutching his head, shouting something she couldn't hear. A distraction. No bait. Her eyes darted back to the rooftop just in time. A muzzle flash bloomed. The shot screamed across the street. She rolled, gravel biting into her palms, heat grazing her ear. The bullet cracked the wall inches from her skull. Sparks spat into her cheek. She bit back a cry and snapped the scope upward, reflex overtaking thought. The silhouette was clear now. A figure crouched low, rifle braced, slim build, not armored, civilian clothes beneath the sling, not a hardened soldier, not a veteran. Her gut turned, young, too young. The muzzle angled toward her again, her chance. But her hands betrayed her. They froze, trembling so violently the crosshairs danced. Her throat tightened. She could not force herself to fire. Not until she saw the eyes. Through a jagged gap in the rooftop rail, their gaze locked with hers. Even across the street, even through glass, she felt it. Not hatred, not rage, just fear. And behind it, the same exhaustion that had eaten her hollow. They were the same. She gasped, and in that breath, another shot cracked. But it didn't come from her enemy. It came from behind. From somewhere further down the street, another rifle sang. The rooftop figure jerked, body twisting backward, rifle clattering across stone. The echo rolled through the city like thunder. She froze. Her scope found the rooftop again, but the figure was gone. Only a smear of movement where they'd fallen out of sight. Her heart dropped. She hadn't pulled the trigger, someone else had. Target neutralized. A voice whispered faintly into her calm, sudden, sharp, alive again. The blackout had lifted. Someone had been watching all along. Someone had decided for her. Her stomach twisted. Relief and nausea fought inside her ribs. She pressed her forehead against the cold stone and let her hands tremble openly now. She hadn't fired. She hadn't killed them, but they were dead anyway. Choice stolen. Her eyes burned, not from dust this time. She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood. The man in the alley crawled out now, dragging himself into the open, still waving, shouting in broken words she couldn't make out. He wasn't running. He was pleading. And she understood, finally. He hadn't been warning her of a single sniper. He had been warning her of the whole web. The trap wasn't just one rifle on a rooftop. It was layers. A game she had already been inside before she knew the rules. Her calm crackled again. Street secured, move forward. Her hands clenched. Street secured. To them it was just an objective. To her it was the face she'd seen through glass, the hesitation she had recognized, the eyes that would never close again except in silence. She rose slowly, body shaking, rifle heavy against her shoulder. The air felt different now, not just heavy, condemning. She stepped into the open street. The man in the alley looked at her as if she held all the answers. She had none. Only questions. Why had she been spared? Why had someone else pulled the trigger for her? And why, even after surviving, did it feel like she had lost something more than her enemy? The city gave no reply. Only silence. The kind of silence that lingers, not because it waits, but because it mourns. Why did her boots feel heavier than her rifle as she walked that street? The mission log would call it complete. The report would say target neutralized. The comm would play back the voices of command with their usual detachment, already moving to the next objective. To them, it was finished. Numbers and maps. An operation checked off a list. But she carried something else. Her steps dragged across broken glass, crunching louder than gunfire in her head. Each shard seemed to whisper the same thing. You didn't choose. You never chose. She wanted to scream, to demand why the world kept handing her lives she didn't want to take, only to snatch the decision away at the last second. The man from the alley followed at a distance, barefoot, limping, one arm clutching his side. He had no weapon, no uniform, no certainty of tomorrow, just eyes that stared at her like she might be more than another shadow in camouflage. Eyes that asked a question she could never answer. Why are you here? Her throat closed. She had asked herself the same thing 100 nights, 1,000. She had joined for honor once, for her father's ghost, for promises she couldn't keep. But standing in the ruins now, the medals and flags felt far away, empty. This was all that remained: silence, loss, the weight of lives too young to die. Her comm crackled again. Good work, extraction en route, hold position. Good work. She almost laughed, but the sound caught in her chest like broken glass. She turned, scanning the rooftop one last time. No body, no rifle, just absence. She would never know the sniper's name, never know if they had joined willingly or been dragged into war like she had. All she knew were the eyes, terrified, human, too much like hers. Her hands trembled as she lowered the rifle, letting it hang against her chest. For a moment, she imagined setting it down on the street and walking away forever. Just leave it there, among the dust and silence, like shedding a skin too heavy to bear. But she didn't. She couldn't. Because someone always had to stay. Someone always had to be the one who looked through the glass, who decided, or failed to decide, who lived, who didn't. Her shoulders sagged as the wind stirred the curtain in a shattered window above, flapping like a torn flag. The sound was almost gentle, almost forgiving. She closed her eyes, listened. Not to orders, not to silence, to her own heartbeat, faint, reluctant, still there. Maybe survival wasn't victory. Maybe it was punishment. Maybe it was both. The man in the alley whispered something then, words she couldn't understand, but his tone carried weight she did. Gratitude, grief, recognition. She gave the smallest nod, not a smile, not comfort, just acknowledgement that they had both stood in the same silence and walked out breathing. That was all. The extraction hum grew louder in the distance, rotors slicing the air. Another mission would come, another street, another silence. She didn't know how many more she could walk. But for now, she placed one hand against the rifle and the other against her chest, steadying the tremor inside. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And the street, once so breathless, finally exhaled.